talk about another couple that was involved with the Ingalls, Amasa and Julia West Tower. Probably one of the saddest stories that we're going to hear about. Amasa Tower was born on March 24th, 1839 in Plymouth, New York to Almond and Mary Sexton Tower, and he was one of 9 children, 7 of which lived to be adults. His grandfather was one of the early settlers that cut the road to New York and settled in Chenango County. He was a large farmer, belonged to the Congregational Church. His father, Almond, was also a farmer and very active in the temperance movement, in religious affairs, and was a Whig who then turned Republican. Amasa decided to come west when he turned of age, and so he ended up coming to Saratoga Township in Winona County, Minnesota, where he met Julia West. And they were married on March 17th, 1866. He was working as a farm laborer and a farmer later. I found a newspaper article that shows in 1869 he was thrown off of a 4-horse reaper down in Winona County and got his left arm mangled in the sickle. And it went into quite detailed account that he was very lucky to have come out with his life. But shortly after they got married and after this incident, they decided to move to Pilot Mound, which was in the neighboring county of Fillmore. And then in 1874, they moved to Springdale Township here in Redwood County. The next year, in 1875, the young couple talked it over, and he decided to run for the county treasurer on the Peoples County ticket, whose convention was held in Lamberton. And he was nominated on an 18-8 vote and was later elected to be the Redwood County treasurer, in which the family then, he kept his farm out here in Springdale, but him and his wife Julia moved to Redwood Falls. And he served as treasurer from 1876 to 1880. Now some other interesting, this is a very sad story because it seems like tragedy befalls them all the time. I found in the Redwood newspaper in May of 1876 he suffered an attack of apoplexy, which was basically a heart attack, as a very young man. He was a member of the Minnesota Agricultural Society. He was the secretary of the Redwood County Bible Society, and also while they were here, he was the superintendent of the Sunday school in which Laura and Mary went to, of the Congregational Church. Well, in 1879, unfortunately, the courthouse was broken into and robbed. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the Redwood Falls Gazette newspaper. It says, "There was no little excitement in our village yesterday morning when it became known that the county treasurer's office had been burglarized. The first reports placed the amount of money stolen at over $4,000, but they exaggerated the facts very greatly. The amount of money actually taken was $960 in currency, $110 in gold, and about $10 in silver change. In all, about $1,080. It comprised Tuesday's receipts by the treasurer, except the gold, which had been on hand for some time. Mr. Tower had deposited on Monday all the county money on hand and went about 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon to make a deposit, but did not find anyone at Mr. Braley's bank depository for the county funds, and concluded to take the money in the safe in the vault for the night. It was the second time ever that all the county money had been kept in the vault overnight. The burglars gained an entrance to the vault through the ventilator on the south side. The hole, which is large enough to admit a man of ordinary proportions, was protected but 2 iron rods and an iron shutter. The latter was not fastened, and the former was easily wrenched out. The money was in the safe, but the door was not locked, and the drawers were opened with a chisel. The papers were displaced, but no damage done, and nothing taken but the money. Money orders and checks and drafts amounting to over $2,000 were in the safe, evidently examined but not taken. After getting through in the vault, the burglars attempted to take off the lock on the vault door, passed through the auditor's and treasurer's office, but failing on that, they went out the ventilation and gained entrance to the office through the transium. In that they obtained the silver, amounting to $10 or more. It was in the treasurer's desk. This is the substance of all that is known in regard to the burglary and the manner in which it was accomplished. We are not aware that there is any clue to which promises to lead to the detection of the parties who committed the crime. Mr. Tower discovered it when he went to the office in the morning. The parties were familiar with the premises, anyone could become so in a short time. but to strike the only night when any money could be obtained is a matter that is less easily understood. Mr. Towers feels very far from comfortable over his loss, but is disposed to let it trouble him as little as possible and says that he sees nothing to be gained by whining. There is probably not one person in the county but will sincerely regret the misfortune that has befallen him, for he is highly esteemed personally and has made a good officer. The problem is, as treasurer, he was responsible. It didn't matter how the money got lost, he was responsible for it, and his bondsmen. And so when his term of office came up, this money was due by him personally. And obviously he didn't have the money. And so he was brought to trial in 1880 before Judge E. St. Julian Cox, which creates a whole new story because initially there was a verdict, and then this Judge Cox decided to throw that verdict aside and grant a new trial, which took place in 1881, which was then appealed to the state Supreme Court. Not only that, but a new judgment was brought against the judge and the fact that he was impeached because he was intoxicated throughout the trial. And so he was brought to the Senate in January of 1882 and impeached. Eventually, after all the dust settled, Tower was required to pay $1,217.10, and the judge was impeached by a vote of 76-10 by the state legislature. And so Amasa Tower was forced to sell his farm and everything that he had, and he and Julia moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, where he had a brother, Myron. The members of the Walnut Grove Congregational Church presented the Towers with 2 pictures to hang in their new home as their appreciation for Julia being the Sunday school teacher and him being the superintendent of the Sunday school. Eventually they decided to homestead in what was the Dakota Territory, which is Hyde County, South Dakota now, near the town of Highmore. On August 19th, 1886, Amasa was stacking oats when a heavy thunderstorm came up, and he was struck and killed by lightning, along with one of the 2 horses that he had. The other horse was able to break free. I found a new article from a Dakota Territory newspaper about it. But the body was brought back here and buried in the Walnut Grove Cemetery. So they must have had strong feelings here for their time in Walnut Grove. It mentioned in the article that he was a leader of the prohibitionists up in Dakota Territory and was also very interested in the Sunday school life and other temperance work. So a little more, Amasa dies, and like we said, he was married to Julia West, who was born on February 15th, 1842 in Minerva, New York, to Leander and Alta Davis West, and was one of 10 children. She had moved west with her family. Her mother had passed away, and her father had remarried in the early 1860s, settling in Winona, where she met Amasa. And like I said, they moved to Springdale Township, where they became part of the Congregational Church. And as Laura mentioned, Julia was a Sunday school teacher. She suffered many losses in her life, and this may have led to some of the tragedy to follow. First with her mother in 1851 passing, then her husband being hit by lightning. That same year, or a few years earlier, I should say, her sister Mary, and her husband, who came to live near them in Springdale Township, passed away. In 1888, she lost her father and also her sister Alice. So she had a lot of death in a short amount of time. Her sister Elizabeth and her husband Joseph Brown also moved to Redwood County to be near them about 1876. So they went through the whole process of the courthouse fiasco with them. And after Amasa's death, Julia came back to live with her sister in Westline Township. And Julia fell into a deep depression, and it became so dire that she was committed to the state hospital in St. Peter, newspaper calling her insane. In 1888, 2 years later, she was released back to the care of her sister, thinking that her mental state was good again. However, within a week, she committed suicide by throwing herself down the well on her sister's farm, and she is buried next to Amasa here in the Walnut Grove City Cemetery. And so this ended probably one of the saddest stories. It sounds like 2 very good people that just had tons of bad luck.